Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be with you today and to share something about my journey. And that's really what I'm going to talk to you about today, is a little bit more about the journey that you heard the outline of. All of us are on a journey, and my stories are unique only because they're mine, and we're all unique. We're all unique and beautiful beings. Realizing the truth of that and integrating it into consciousness is really what the journey is about. And it sounds really simple, but I'm learning that it's really very difficult to do. Like most of us, I lived much of my life pursuing the American dream of material success and recognition. It wasn't very satisfying to me, even when I was somewhat successful. In my 30s, I was beginning to find my footing as a corporate lawyer, but I was depressed and unhappy. A psychotherapist that I was seeing sent me to see Jan Weiss, which is a kind of an unusual thing for a psychotherapist to do, but that's what she did. The reading that I had with Jan changed my life. She was working then as a trance medium here in Houston. And it wasn't so much the specific information that she gave me. It was the underlying message that I was a good person. Not a good person if I got a raise at work, lived in the right neighborhood, had the slimmest body and the nicest clothes. Do you find it difficult to accept the truth that you are a good person, worthwhile and lovable just as you are? There are many days I still have trouble taking that concept in. The messages of conditional love and acceptance, voices that we first heard outside but later hear inside, are much louder than the ones that tell us we're lovable just as we are. Behind those negative inner voices, there is a whisper that becomes a buzzing. For me, eventually, it became audible, the voice that called me to hear what the Spirit was saying. After my experience with Jan Weiss, I was able to continue my legal career for some time. But the day eventually came when I had to acknowledge that it was not bringing me joy, contentment, or inner peace. I walked away from it. I began to study Christianity and contemplative spirituality. And since I began this new phase of my journey, a curious phenomenon keeps showing up. It seems that no matter where I look, even among the most diverse sources of inspiration, I keep encountering the same basic message about the nature of God and the spiritual journey. Those few hours I spent with Jan Weiss were the start of my adult journey, but the most significant event did not take place until nearly 20 years later. That was beginning the daily practice of centering prayer, a form of meditation developed by Thomas Keating and others. Keating is a Trappist monk, and the method is derived from early Christian prayer practices. As soon as I tried centering prayer, I knew it was for me. So I kept doing it. Soon I could not do it. Nothing much happens when you do it, but it changes your life. It changes your relationship to God. Many of you probably grew up with the understanding of God that prevailed in my childhood home. God is somewhere out there or up there, and like Santa Claus, is watching to see if you're naughty or nice. In the religion of my earliest formation, God was exterior. It came as an amazing shock, therefore, when I read Thomas Keating, what Thomas Keating says about the location of God. God is not out there. God is not other to us. The spirituality of divine indwelling is central to centering prayer. I read with a certain shocked incredulity Thomas Keating's statement, though you are not God, God and your true self are the same thing. My journey, it seems, is largely a process of unlearning the exterior understanding of God that I learned in childhood. It is about the discovery of a spirituality within, an understanding of God that is utterly foreign to the one taught to me as a child. It was Thomas Keating who first articulated this spirituality for me, but as I say, I continue to find it everywhere I look. Eventually, I began to pay attention to this phenomenon. I started taking notes. At some point, I got this strange idea of going to seminary. and my seminary study was an important part of my journey, although it didn't turn out like I expected. Shortly after I began my time in Perkins, I began to study Mary Magdalene, and I encountered the same interior spirituality in the Gospel of Mary, a text that appeals to her authority and in which Mary Magdalene plays a prominent role. No scholar claims that Mary Magdalene wrote the Gospel of Mary, but the scholars of the text recognize her as the visionary woman whose leadership and authority sparked controversy in the text about a theology of the inner presence of fully realized humanity, capable of intense intimacy with the divine. The Gospel of Mary was first written in Greek during the 2nd century, although the longest surviving fragment of it is in Coptic, in a 5th century codex found in Egypt. It is generally thought to depict a post-resurrection dialogue between Jesus and some of his followers, including Mary Magdalene, Peter, and Andrew. At the end of his teaching, Jesus instructs the disciples to look within. The text reads, "When the Blessed One had said these things, he greeted them all. 'Peace be with you. Acquire my peace within yourselves. Be on your guard, so that no one deceives you by saying, look over here, or look over there. For the child of true humanity exists within you. Follow it. Those who search for it will find it.'" In the Gospel of Mary, it is through following this teaching that we become fully human. It is a text that portrays salvation as inner transformation. The spirituality of God within appeared again when I studied the Beguines and other medieval mystics. I came to see it as a sort of underground stream that runs through the Christian tradition, emerging in works by many mystics. I was particularly interested in its frequent appearance in the spirituality of women. One example is the 14th century English Christian mystic Julian of Norwich, who writes movingly her showings of prayer as an act of sensory intimacy with God that brings the devotee so close as to breathe, smell, and taste the divine. And then she writes, "We shall all enter into our Lord, clearly knowing ourselves and fully possessing God." The totality of union between the lover of God and the beloved is perhaps most fully and strikingly expressed in the quotation attributed to the Christian Saint Catherine of Genoa. "My me is my God, nor do I know my selfhood except in God." Note that a second theme has emerged. Not only is God within us, the mystical experience brings awareness that it is in fully knowing ourselves that we come to know God. "My me is my God, nor do I know my selfhood except in God." The spiritual stream of divine indwelling is love, love so intense and immediate that it becomes indistinguishable from the interiority of the believer. This stream of divine love also connects the spiritualities of women separated by centuries, cultural contexts, and religious traditions. And not just women. Even in the writings of St. Augustine, the Christian bishop, the notion of union between God and the believer's inmost self appears again, as does the theme of self-knowledge as a critical element of the spiritual journey. St. Augustine said, "Lord, that I may know myself, that I may know you." In the writings attributed to the Sufi mystic, Rabia of Basra, born about 500 years before Rumi, who I understand is still the best-selling poet in the world, these same powerful, unitive, and numinous dimensions of intimacy with the divine again spring forth and flow. After a period of harsh asceticism, Rabia emerged through the gateway of prayer into a dimension of Sufi love for God that was beyond mere worship. Her concept of God transcended limits. She knew a God whose door was without hinge or key,